Hey friends, my name is Steve Guttenberg, and I am the Audiophiliac, and today I'm going to take a little stroll down memory lane. I'm going to do a personal history of audio, and we're going to start in the 50s, the late 1950s, and I had a pocket transistor radio. And in those days, transistor radios were, let's say, rated by how many transistors they had. There were 6 transistor radios. There were 8 transistor radios. If you're a big shot, maybe a 10 transistor radio. I think I mostly had 6 or 8 transistor radios. I wasn't high end quite yet in those days. And you'd walk around with the radio up to your ear, and you'd walk around, or you'd take it to the beach or something. Then people had bigger, transistor radios that you'd take to the beach that could play a little louder. And the other big thing in the 50s was my parents' jukebox. They had a Wurlitzer jukebox, and I would lay on the floor and I'd listen to this bass coming out of these probably 15-inch woofers, and I was soaking in the sound, and it sort of rearranged my DNA. I think something happened in front. I don't think the transistor radio did it. I think it was the Wurlitzer, and it was probably a tube Wurlitzer now that I think about it. I'm sure there were lots of tubes in there. Anyway, okay, so then we get to the 60s, and in the 60s, in the mid-60s, I bought my first hi-fi of my own, which was, it was this chain store called Corvettes, with a K, and I bought a XAM brand speakers, which I've talked about in another one of these videos, and a Garrard turntable, and an XAM branded amplifier. And I was in all my glory, and I played my Beatles and my Stones records, and I was in Seventh Heaven, and that was also a big thing in my life, was getting my first hi-fi. And then slowly, by a little bit here, a little bit there, I changed the cartridge, I got different speakers, things kept creeping up, and here I am today. No, so anyway, that was the 60s. Yeah, in the 60s, I got an Empire turntable, which was really big deal. It was this amazing looking brass thing with big wood bass, and I never got it to work. It looked great, didn't sound great, because I don't think I knew how to make it work. I don't think I could set it up adequately to show off what that Empire could do, so the Empire didn't last, and I replaced that with a Miracord turntable, ELAC. Miracord, sound familiar? ELAC? And ELAC was much better. I stayed with that ELAC, I think, until I got my Lin LP12, and that was in 1977 or 1978. And I also, in the 70s, I had Bose 501 speakers. I'm sorry. It was a transgression, but it paved the way for me getting into high-end audio, because my next speaker was Freed, a Freed Model W speaker. That's where it really began. And those Freeds were life-changing, literally, because that's when I met Andy Singer, and then eventually worked for Sound by Singer, and that led to 16 years of hearing vast amounts of high-end audio gear. The stores and people's own stuff that they traded in. It was definitely college. I got my doctorate degree in audiophileness working at Sound by Singer for 16 years. I got my second doctorate, I'm joking, of course, when I started writing about it, and I've written, I'm making up a number here, a couple of thousand reviews since I started in 1997. But that's getting ahead of the story. So that was the 70s. So by the late 70s, I met Andy Singer, and that was the beginning of the golden age of high-end audio. Mostly American, but there was a lot of British hi-fi, there was some German, there was some Japanese high-end. But it seemed, maybe because I'm here, it seemed centered in the US. And then we get to the 80s. Gee, I wonder what happened in the 1980s. Oh, digital. So digital comes along in 82 with the first Sony CDP, was it? 101 CD player? And the Philips, I forget the model of the Philips, because Philips and Sony jointly developed the CD system. And that set the whole high-end world upside down, because up to that point it was 100% analog. So everybody crapped on digital for the first 8 or 10 years, saying it was awful, no, it couldn't compare to the sound of a good turntable. But slowly by slowly, digital got better and better. And certainly by the 90s, it was mature. And I went through, God, I can't begin to count how many CD players or transports or DACs I owned in those years. But I had a Meridian, I had Wadia, I had Theta, I had California Audio Labs. I had a lot. Anyway, So through the 90s, digital definitely got better and better, and I started working with Chesky Records in the late 90s, and I worked as a co-producer, assistant producer on, I don't know, 50, 60, 70 Chesky sessions, and just being there, trying to capture the sound of those singers and instruments in a live space, not in a dead recording studio, but in a real, beautifully acoustic place, usually a church. Was also, that's where I got my second doctorate degree, or third. I can't keep up with how many I already have, but I kept learning, I kept hearing, and kept having these experiences. And I also started writing in the late 1990s. And I started writing for The Absolute Sound in 1997. I wrote for Listener magazine, wrote for Sound Practice. No, I didn't write for Sound Practice. I wrote for Positive Feedback. I wrote for lots of little magazines. I wrote for Listener, which was also a high point. Working with Art Dudley, it was fantastic. And then I started working for Home Theater magazine, and many. I'm not going to bore you with all the magazines I wrote for, but working for those magazines, again, exposed me to vast amounts of equipment. And in the case of home theater stuff, meaning surround sound. So that was that carries us through the 2000s, and now we're in the teens. And I've been, I was also started writing for CNET. Silly me. It's like my main job since the beginning of this century. CNET, where I wrote gazillions of reviews, and I started the Audiophiliac blog, which I had to churn through vast, even a higher rate of reviews. In the beginning of the Audiophiliac blog, I wrote 5 a week. So I think we're kind of caught up. As I said, this isn't everything, because I don't think we have the time. I think the memory in my video recorder would run out of space before I got done. Anyway, there's the Steve Guttenberg Audiophiliac audio history in 7 minutes. So as always, if you like these videos, please subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please share them, like them, do all that social media stuff. And I'll see you again real soon. And I'm done.